midnight 03:005:45 a.m., September 1st, 1939. The morning fog clings to the fields of Poland like a damp, grey shroud. A chill bites through thin uniforms. Birds scatter in sudden panic as the distant roar of aircraft engines grows louder, vibrating through the soil, rattling the fragile shutters of villages. Smoke curls into the sky, black, acrid, sharp. Soldiers tighten their grips on rifles, boots sinking into mud churned by heavy trucks. Somewhere, a mother presses her children against a cracked doorframe, eyes wide with fear, listening to the first salvo of a war the world is about to remember. War does not announce itself with headlines. It arrives with sound and smell, with a sudden, violent disruption of life. The world would not recognize peace again for 6 long years. Europe had been simmering for decades, scarred by a previous war that promised to be the war to end all wars. The Treaty of Versailles left bitterness, economic collapse, and territorial disputes. Germany, humiliated and constrained, began quietly rebuilding its military under the iron fist of Adolf Hitler. Meanwhile, Japan expanded in Asia, and Italy under Mussolini sought to rekindle an empire lost in history. The stage was set, not with a single spark, but a slow, inevitable accumulation of tension. By the 1930s, military technology had evolved at a terrifying pace. Tanks grew heavier, planes faster, and radio communications allowed armies to coordinate with deadly precision. Germany's doctrine of Blitzkrieg, lightning war, combined armored divisions with air power and infantry, creating a strategy designed to overwhelm quickly, decisively, and with minimal delay. The world would soon witness how theory and technology could merge into unstoppable force. In Britain, leaders debated the gathering storm, their chambers echoing with cautious words and uneasy glances. In France, soldiers drilled endlessly, practicing the defensive maneuvers they hoped would hold the line. And across the Atlantic, the United States watched from a distance, a nation still reeling from economic depression, reluctant to be drawn into a European conflict. Yet war is never only strategy and politics. It is people. Thousands of young men left homes they might never see again. Nurses prepared to face horrors unimaginable. Factory workers labored under the hum of machinery, knowing their output would feed engines of destruction. And children learned the fearful sounds of air raid sirens before they could ride bicycles without fear. When Germany invaded Poland, the Blitzkrieg unfolded with shocking speed. Panzer divisions rolled forward like mechanized rivers, their tracks tearing through villages, their cannons cutting paths through defenses. Stuka dive bombers screamed overhead, precision and terror combined, as if the very air conspired with destruction. Soldiers and civilians alike had little time to react. Chaos moved faster than comprehension. Within weeks, Poland fell, and the world was forced to recognize that Europe's fragile peace had shattered. The fall of Poland triggered a cascade. Britain and France, bound by treaties, declared war on Germany, but their actions could not stop the storm gathering in the east. Meanwhile, Hitler's attention turned westward, calculating, patient, preparing for the invasion of France, Belgium, and the Low Countries. At the same time, in the Soviet Union, Stalin watched, uncertain and wary, weighing alliance against threat, knowing that one misstep could engulf his own vast nation in flames. Across oceans, Japan's empire expanded relentlessly. In Manchuria and China, cities burned. Civilians fled or fought, and the horrors of modern warfare, chemical weapons, strategic bombings, urban combat, became all too real. The world was entering a war not only of nations, but of ideologies, fascism, communism, and democracy clashing with catastrophic consequences. Yet, amidst strategy and machinery, human ingenuity and resilience emerged. Engineers in secret workshops tested new tanks and planes. Cryptographers scrambled to decode enemy messages. Pilots trained in the cold mornings of Europe, knowing that speed, skill, and courage might mean life or death. And in London, Churchill, a man of indomitable spirit, warned of the long struggle ahead, his voice carrying determination through the uncertainty, rallying a nation still haunted by the shadow of Versailles. By mid-1940, Germany had stunned the world with the fall of France in just 6 weeks. Paris, the city of light, now occupied. The British Army evacuated from Dunkirk, thousands of soldiers wading through water, barely escaping encirclement. And across the Channel, Hitler's Luftwaffe prepared to destroy Britain from the skies. The Battle of Britain loomed, a clash not of tanks or infantry, but of planes, radar stations, and nerves. Meanwhile, deeper in Europe, resistance movements quietly formed. Civilians became spies, couriers, and saboteurs. Ordinary people faced impossible choices, risking everything to protect lives or ideals. Each act of courage, small or large, rippled through the fabric of war, shaping events in ways generals could not command, and yet, the war's reach was global. In North Africa, deserts became battlefields of sun and sand, where Rommel's Afrika Korps clashed with British forces. Supply lines stretched across hostile terrain. Soldiers' throats burned from dust, water was precious, and the desert was as unforgiving as any enemy. The stakes were high. Control of Africa meant access to oil, trade routes, and strategic advantage. By now, the machinery of total war had begun to turn. Factories churned out weapons at unprecedented speeds. Propaganda reinforced loyalty and hatred alike. Science raced to create new tools of destruction, from more efficient tanks to bombs designed to devastate cities. The scale was staggering, the implications terrifying, but in the midst of destruction, glimmers of humanity persisted. Letters between soldiers and families. Secret acts of kindness amidst bombing raids. Courage under fire that defied statistics. War was reshaping the world, but it was also testing the limits of human endurance, ingenuity, and morality. And then, in 1941, a decision would shake the globe even further. Germany, having secured much of Western Europe, turned east, launching Operation Barbarossa against the Soviet Union. Millions of soldiers marched into a land of vast forests, frozen rivers, and winter so harsh it would become legendary. The Eastern Front would consume men and material on a scale never seen before. Cities would burn, populations would scatter, and the sheer brutality of human conflict would be laid bare as millions braced for the horrors ahead. Another storm gathered in the Pacific. Japan, seeking dominance over Southeast Asia, would collide with the United States at Pearl Harbor, drawing a sleeping giant into a war that now truly spanned the globe. The stage was set for a conflict so massive, so devastating, that every nation would be touched, every life altered. The question now was no longer whether the world would be at war, but how it would survive it. And as the first shadows of 1942 stretched across continents, one unasked but terrifying question loomed. Could humanity endure what was coming, or was the war about to redefine the very meaning of survival? June the 22nd, 1941, the sun rises over the endless forests and fields of the Soviet Union, but it brings no warmth, only the cold steel of invasion. Operation Barbarossa begins. Millions of German soldiers surge eastward, tanks rolling in perfect synchronization, engines growling like hungry beasts. Dust rises in thick clouds, masking the movement of infantry and armored columns. Birds scatter from tree branches, their cries swallowed by the distant thunder of artillery. Soviet soldiers scramble to respond. Trenches are dug in a frenzy. Red flags flutter as commanders shout orders over the roar of mechanized warfare. The air is electric with tension. Civilians watch from doorways, faces pale, hearts pounding. This is no longer a war of borders. This is a war of survival. Meanwhile, in North Africa, another front rumbles to life. The desert stretches endlessly under a blazing sun, sand shimmering like fire. Italian forces advance into Egypt, but British General Montgomery and his troops, dug into fortified positions, are ready. Tanks crunch across sand dunes. Artillery shells whistle overhead, leaving streaks of smoke that burn bright against the blue sky. Soldiers sweat through heavy uniforms, grit in their teeth, thirst, and fear as constant companions. And in these deserts, the first legends of tank warfare emerge. Rommel, the desert fox, striking with speed and cunning, testing the limits of men and machines alike. Back in Europe, the skies tell another story. The Battle of Britain rages. German bombers darken the clouds above London, their shadows sweeping over rooftops. Anti-aircraft fire cracks the air, a chorus of defiance. Inside the city, Families huddle in shelters, listening as bombs shake the foundations beneath them. Children grip parents' hands, wide-eyed. Pilots in Spitfires and Hurricanes maneuver with deadly precision, knowing one wrong move could mean a fiery death. And yet, against overwhelming odds, Britain holds. Radar installations blink and hum, providing glimpses of approaching squadrons, technology now intertwined with courage, tipping the scales of fate across the Atlantic. The US watches with growing unease. The Japanese Empire, ambitious and relentless, strikes Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. Ships burn in the harbor, black smoke spiraling into the sky. Explosions rock the decks, sending sailors flying. Planes crash into water, their pilots trapped in flames. The nation awakens from isolationism, anger, and resolve building. Congress declares war. The world tilts further toward total conflict. In the Pacific, battles stretch across thousands of miles of ocean. Aircraft carriers become floating fortresses, and the Battle of Midway in 1942 proves decisive. American pilots, flying with nerves and skill honed under pressure, catch Japanese carriers by surprise. Flames consume enemy decks, and the tide of naval supremacy begins to shift. Every maneuver, every choice, every second counts. One mistake can change the course of the war. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, the harsh Russian winter sets in. Temperatures plunge below freezing, and machinery falters. German troops, unprepared for the brutal cold, struggle to advance. Frostbite claims soldiers faster than bullets, supplies are delayed by snowbound roads, and morale falters. The Soviet Union, massive and relentless, fights back with fierce determination. Cities like Leningrad endure sieges lasting months, civilians surviving on scraps, enduring hunger, fear, and death. And in Stalingrad, the city's rubble becomes a weapon. Snipers lie in wait, street by street, building by building, every inch is contested. War is not only fought on battlefields. Intelligence becomes as crucial as artillery. Cryptographers work around the clock to crack codes. The Allies' success at deciphering Enigma messages gives them a window into German strategy. Spies risk death for information. And factories, operating day and night, produce tanks, planes, and weapons in an industrial rhythm that will define modern warfare. In Europe, innovation accelerates under pressure. Jet aircraft take to the skies. Rockets are tested. Amphibious tanks roll into water, attempting to overcome fortified beaches. Engineers and soldiers alike push the boundaries of possibility, driven by necessity, desperation, and the desire for survival. But for every brilliant advance, the cost is staggering. Cities are leveled, millions die in combat or under bombardment, families are torn apart, leaving scars that will last generations. Resistance movements rise in occupied territories. In France, the Marquis sabotage rail lines, disrupt German supply chains, and risk everything to send intelligence to London. In Poland, partisans hide in forests, striking in shadows. The human spirit resists, even in the darkest hours, proving that courage is not measured only in armies but in individuals who refuse to surrender. Yet, the Holocaust continues, a silent machinery of horror. Camps expand, ghettos are sealed, and millions of innocent lives are extinguished. The scale of this atrocity begins to emerge in fragments. Testimonies from escapees, intercepted reports, rumors whispered among soldiers and civilians. The world is waking to a horror that seems unimaginable, even as the war rages on other fronts. And then there is D-Day, June 6, 1944. The beaches of Normandy are a crucible. Soldiers step off landing craft into frigid water, bullets and shells tearing through the surf. Mud and blood mix. Commanders shout over the chaos, urging men forward. Tanks struggle through sand and obstacles, while paratroopers drop behind enemy lines, their fate uncertain. For every step gained, thousands risk everything. The liberation of Europe has begun, but at a staggering cost. The war also extends to technology and strategy in unexpected ways. Night raids by bombers, sonar-equipped ships hunting submarines, and long-range artillery redefine how battles are fought. Even medicine evolves rapidly, with field hospitals learning to treat trauma, infection, and frostbite under conditions that would have been catastrophic just years before. Every innovation carries consequences: new weapons, new tactics, and new forms of suffering. By mid-1944, the tide is shifting. Soviet forces push westward, reclaiming territory inch by bloody inch. The Western Allies advance from Normandy, liberating towns and cities, confronting the harsh reality of German resistance and civilian suffering alike. Air raids, armored assaults, and naval bombardments combine into a relentless push. Victory seems possible, but the human cost is enormous, and as Europe begins to see glimpses of hope, questions remain. How will the Axis respond? Can the Allies maintain momentum? What toll has the war taken on the civilians, soldiers, and cities caught in its grip? The machinery of conflict grinds on. Lives hang in balance. Every decision, every action, every second of courage or mistake carries weight. And just as the final chapters approach, the world braces for the climactic confrontations that will decide not only borders, but the fate of millions, and perhaps the future of humanity itself. April the 16th, 1945. Berlin lies in ruins. Smoke rises from shattered streets, carrying the bitter scent of fire and death. The sound of artillery echoes through empty avenues, punctuated by the groan of collapsing buildings. Soldiers stumble over rubble, faces streaked with dirt, exhaustion, and fear. Civilians huddle in basements, eyes wide, wondering if the next explosion will be their last. The war that has consumed the world for 6 years has reached its heart. From the east, Soviet forces advance relentlessly. Tanks crush debris under their treads. Infantry moves through streets in tense coordination, every corner a potential trap. The Red Army presses forward, knowing that every step may be met with snipers, booby traps, and desperate resistance. The Germans, depleted, exhausted, but unbroken in will, defend fiercely. Hitler's Reich is collapsing, but the machinery of war refuses to die quietly. Meanwhile, to the west, American and British forces push through Germany. Cities like Cologne and Hamburg lie battered, yet still offer resistance. Bombed-out streets are silent except for distant gunfire, the occasional scream, and the whistle of a shell cutting through the air. The Allies face not only soldiers but the trauma of civilians trapped between advancing armies. Families search for loved ones amid rubble, trying to reclaim some semblance of normality. The human toll of war is staggering, a reminder that victory comes at a price too high to calculate. Across the Pacific, Japan is nearing its own breaking point. Island by island, American forces advance, often facing entrenched defenders in jungles, caves, and cliffs. Marines wade through coral reefs under fire, carrying heavy packs, hearts hammering, lungs burning. Kamikaze pilots crash planes into ships, a terrifying fusion of courage, desperation, and fanaticism. Each island conquered is a step closer to Japan, but each step is soaked in blood, sand, and sweat. In the skies, atomic clouds are gathering. Scientific breakthroughs, spurred by the urgency of war, reach their terrifying apex. The Manhattan Project, a secret buried deep beneath New Mexico deserts, is about to change everything. Explosions tested in isolation, inconceivably powerful, promise a way to end the war, but at a cost never before imagined. Questions of morality, necessity, and devastation hover over the decision to use these weapons. Could one bomb truly save lives by ending a war? Or does it cross a line from strategy into unimaginable horror? August the 6th, 1945. Hiroshima. The sky ignites in brilliant, blinding light. Buildings vanish. The earth itself seems to shiver. Voices are silenced instantly. Heat incinerates everything in its path. 3 days later, Nagasaki. The same terrible calculus, repeated. Japan surrenders. The war, after 6 years, claims its final act in fire, ash, and human suffering. Victory in Europe and the Pacific marks a turning point for humanity. Yet, the world is forever altered. Cities lie in ruin. Families are shattered. Millions of soldiers and civilians have perished. Entire populations have been displaced, and survivors carry memories too heavy for words. The Holocaust's shadow looms over the continent, millions of innocent lives extinguished in a systematic, industrialized nightmare. Humanity is forced to confront not just the horrors of war, but the depths of cruelty it can unleash. But in the rubble, glimmers of hope appear. Nations begin to rebuild. Former enemies work toward reconciliation, tentative and fragile. The United Nations forms, a collective effort to prevent another catastrophe. Advances in medicine, engineering, and technology, born of necessity during the conflict, transform civilian life in peacetime. Radar, jet engines, and nuclear energy, all tested in the crucible of war, now promise progress alongside caution. Stories of courage, ingenuity, and resistance endure. Pilots who risk their lives, partisans in forests, medics in field hospitals, engineers working day and night, they remind us that even in the darkest times, humanity can shine. The war also leaves an enduring lesson, that preparation, vigilance, and moral clarity are vital, not only in conflict but in peace. Yet questions remain, whispered by history. Could the world have acted sooner to prevent such devastation? How do we reconcile the heroism of soldiers with the cruelty of regimes? And as technology grows ever more powerful, how do we ensure that human ambition does not outpace our wisdom? World War II changed everything. Borders were redrawn, empires dissolved, and a new global order emerged. The shadow of the conflict lingers in every city rebuilt, every memorial, every history lesson taught in classrooms around the world. It reminds us that while war may accelerate technology, strategy, and political power, it leaves scars that no blueprint or machine can erase. Today, when jets streak across the sky, when submarines patrol oceans, when rockets rise from launch pads, the echoes of World War II resonate. The innovations born from desperation, the courage of ordinary people, and the resilience of nations all carry forward. Each museum, memorial, and archive preserves a fragment of the human story, urging reflection and vigilance as we stand in the 21st century. The lessons are clear yet haunting: vigilance against tyranny, courage in the face of unimaginable odds, and the responsibility to wield power wisely. We remember the war not to glorify violence, but to honor sacrifice, to understand the cost of conflict, and to strive for a future where humanity learns from its past rather than repeating it. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of Europe, the Pacific Islands, and cities rebuilt from ash, survivors whisper memories of those who never returned. Their voices, carried across decades, ask us to remember, to learn, to hope, and to ask ourselves, quietly, whether the world will ever truly be ready to prevent such destruction again. The war ended, but its lessons endure. Courage and cruelty, innovation and devastation, sacrifice and survival. They exist forever intertwined in the story of humanity. And as we look back, we are left with one inescapable truth. The echoes of World War II are not just history. They are warnings, inspirations, and reflections of ourselves.
Thanks for watching this chapter of World War II. If you find this video helpful, please support us by liking and dropping a comment. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to catch the next chapter of this series. Until then, take care.